Hello, welcome to the Entrepreneurs Network. I'm Rick Anthony. Every so often you meet someone whose life story is the stuff of best-selling novels or movies. People who live their convictions, go against convention, and are catalysts for change in just about every aspect of their lives. I met one such person about a year ago over a dinner table at the university, at Villanova University, where I and my guest today both serve as adjunct faculty members. I'd heard about Jim McCloskey from his students. I heard about his stories, I heard about his enthusiasm, I heard about the real life experiences he brought into every one of his classes. True stories about people and events and places in the United States and in Asia particularly, where he had served with distinction, some might say heroically, in the Vietnam War. Welcome Jim McCloskey, come on, Rick. Welcome Jim McCloskey to the Entrepreneurs Network.
Thank you, Rick.
I know I can pronounce your name because I've done it so often in the past.
I've been called worse.
Jim, I don't know where to start with you. I'm going to read this litany. I really don't know where to start with you because in the time you've been on the planet, you have been involved in so many ventures, you've interacted with so many people, and have achieved so much, mostly on their behalf, not so much your own. But you are a consultant with companies in this country and abroad. You manage an investment fund, a small investment fund. You've started and run your own businesses. You're an expert in the Asian economy and often bring government agencies in Washington, often brief agencies in Washington, about trends in that part of the world. You teach at Villanova and Hanoi University, where you've developed business courses. You organize and lead charitable causes, one of which we'll talk about today, to honor veterans, care for seriously ill children, and promote economic development where it's most needed. And that's not all of it. That would take up most Saturday and Sunday, I think, for most people. Has your life up to this point gone according to plan, or has much of that been happenstance, just opportunistic?
I try to consider myself somewhat spontaneous, so I honestly have to say a lot of it's reactionary. And I guess I'm more of a crisis management mode, and if I see something that has to be fixed, I try to figure a way to find a way of doing that. And obviously today there are more problems and challenges, and I try to convert the challenge to opportunity wherever I can.
Where are you from originally, and where did this desire, instinct, reflexive activity on your behalf, if there's an issue, if there's a problem, if there's something to be done, you're going to get it done, either with or without other people, but somehow you're going to get it done. What's the origin of that?
Well, I was born in Lower Bucks County, went to LaSalle High School, and probably the transformation took place when I landed in a place called Vietnam. And I didn't have a lot of leading edge going into that, and so it had to be a lot of figuring things out pretty quick. And I was the head of a...
Which branch of the service?
I was in the Army, and I was with a mobile advisory team that had been trained in language and culture and a lot of other cultural nuances and what, so... 1969. Well, I'm dating myself, but actually I was only 9 when I was there.
Of course, so, yes.
But the idea of a challenge, I had the opportunity of figuring out real quick that a lot of people I was working with in the villages, militias and others, had fought with the Viet Minh against the French. So I had to somehow get into their head and figure out how I could align myself. And I did a lot of listening, and that's where I learned a lot of this. And a lot of it after that was, again, because I didn't necessarily have the kind of logistical support that maybe an active military would have, because we were a team of 7 and just sort of pillaged every which way we could. And we came up with a lot of very creative ideas which lent themselves to pacification. And again, but it was a real learning curve process.
This was a special unit?
It was a special unit. We were under a certain program that was a classified program. And we were to identify with the other. Well, the other became part of me as well, because I understood the philosophy of everything from Ho Chi Minh to whoever else, and we approached it from the standpoint of how are we going to bring a level of stability to this place. They're not obviously going to accept democracy, so what do they really need? In most cases, it was things like health care and and food and other things. So again, we did support a lot of that, and we did it very creatively. And I think I mentioned before, we had access to a German medical ship that was sitting idly in the middle of the port of Da Nang, doing nothing. And then on one afternoon, I went up to see them, and it was 37 miles north of me. And I sat down with the captain of the ship, and he brought on 6 doctors that sat down with me, and I said, would you guys like to get involved in something a little less conventional? You're sitting here idly in the middle of the harbor. And they all said yes. So I had Air America pick them up the next morning, 6 doctors and 4 nurses, and they spent the next 7 weeks with us. We were dealing with everything from leprosy to elephantiasis to malaria to what. And it was quite rewarding. It was rewarding for them, and it was very rewarding in terms of how the Vietnamese saw this. And they said, hey, you know, this is a different approach.
Yeah.
You know?
So are you saying that in that special circumstance, the Army gave you and your colleagues leeway to put together programs that you felt would have value not just during the conflict but after the conflict?
Not really. In fact, many of them said flat out no.
Oh.
But historically, and that goes back to, I guess I can blame it on my parents, unfortunately I find myself not often asking for permission. That way I'm not disappointed.
Poor parents.
Yeah. Oh yeah. God bless them.
Do you have siblings?
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
My older brothers.
You were the worst of the
I was the worst. I was definitely the off the track, 3 center deviations to the left of whoever you wanted. My brother's a very successful orthopedic surgeon. My sister's in teaching. My brother's in commercial real estate.
And then there's Jim.
And then there's Jim. Yes. Yes.
You
I won't say the ogre quite yet. But
okay.
Yeah. Here we are.
How long were you in Vietnam, in the military?
I was in the military, actually active duty for 2 years and 11 months, was in Vietnam for about 15. And then because of the special operations school and everything else, I was mandated to stay in another 3 years. And I said, and I contested that, and I didn't want any parts of it. I think I sold my uniforms to the hippies at that point, and you know, I didn't have much of a uniform, and I was, again, 3 standard deviations to the left of Che Guevara as far as they were concerned. They didn't want any parts of me. So after they decided, after the 11th letter they sent me, certified, I had to respond, so I did respond. And I said, it's going to be the biggest mistake you probably ever made, because I got all these people that, at that point, most of them went in the reserves to get out of Vietnam. I'm not begrudging that. I don't care. You do whatever you wanted to do. I volunteered for Vietnam. But they were definitely the others, and they did everything they could to try to rewrite the script to get me out of. So I found that as an opportunity to get a lot of them deployed, because the people I were talking to were out of Fort Bragg, North Carolina, 1st Army, the commanding general. And I said, I have a group of people that, in fact, we can gainfully employ. And they're, some of them are multilingual. They have a lot of other civilian skills. They're PEs in terms of engineering. They're this, that, and other. And we can use them in places like Honduras and others. So I got them all deployed. They didn't necessarily want that, but they were thrilled when they got there. So it was a learning curve for them, too. So they don't know how it all happened, but it did. So, and again, that was as a lowly captain. I stayed in for 30 years because I saw the chance of making a big difference, as we did, in everything from, I had a unit deployed to Rwanda, in Bosnia, Iraq, many other places. We've done a lot of other things, too. So we rewrote the script of the reserve component.
So you are now retired military?
Well, mostly retired.
Mostly retired. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I try to keep in touch. And,
Yeah.
you know.
But a career of special projects,
Yes.
ranging from things you can't talk about
Well,
to economic development projects, education, healthcare, et cetera, et cetera. Mostly in Vietnam?
well,
Or other parts of that region as
other
well?
parts too, but I have focused, South America, I've done a lot of that, but South America, in my opinion, is moving a little further left than I thought. Asia, I see, is maintaining a 6% growth rate, and I'm looking primarily at Southeast Asia. China is very difficult to get into. You're not going to get in now. If you didn't get in 12 years ago, the door is slammed shut. But Southeast Asia, and I took ASEAN, Association of Southeast Asian Nations, and it's 10 nations that go everywhere from Thailand Laos and Cambodia are 2 to 3 years away. Vietnam is coming up the pioneering cut. And then you have the admix of Malaysia, Indonesia, Singapore, Sri Lanka, and an offshoot of Australia in this thing too. So,
How did you connect with Hanoi University and the program that you built there?
well, I started in 2007 with Ho Chi Minh University, and that was because of the WTO certification, World Trade Organization. And I said, it's time to go back. They got that in January 2007. I went in June of 2007. And I sat down with the commercial consulate and a guy named Leon. And I explained my situation. I said, listen, I have a few weeks here. I'm excited to be back. How can I help? This is when I went to the embassy. And he goes, what? You know, and I had the little portfolio and had to preface it with, well, yeah, I got shot a few times over here and a few other things, but I still speak enough of the language, and I certainly know the culture. And I spouted off the cities I lived in, everything from Dinh Ban to Hoi An to Dui Xuyen.
While you were
all
in the
this.
military?
Yeah, while I was in the military. And he goes, oh, wow, you do know. Yes, I do. And I not only know, but I know how, okay? So all of a sudden the door opened and it said, well, my brother was supposed to be the Minister of Education, but he had the opportunity to take it over at Ho Chi Minh University. And he would be thrilled to have you down there. So he said, what are you doing today? I said, say when. So we went over. And I did the pitch to about 7 of them down this long table, which all the Asians do, and have you down the other end. And I asked them if they spoke English, in Vietnamese, and a few of that went across. And I don't know whether they were favorably impressed or anything else, but the idea was, yes, we do speak English. And I said, well, hey, here's what I can do. And they were like, whoa, all of a sudden got a little more excited. They said, when can you start?
What was
and
the
I said,
offer?
tonight.
What was
the
the
offer was, I said, how about me putting a course together that was called Vietnam and Where It Fits in Today's Borderless Economy? Are you interested? And what does Vietnam want to do? They want to be part of this great expansion in this borderless economy. So they were thrilled. So they said, when can you start? I said, tonight. Well, that night, I had 27 students in the class. The second night, I had 340.
Wow.
The next night after that, we had to take over the theater. There were 817 students in the class.
But you must have been dealing with a language problem, or do they speak English? Were they at that
60%
point?
of them speak English, and I got around enough of it. I had an interpreter to fill in the blanks, but I did enough Vietnamese that I warmed the audience up, and I spoke very slowly. So in fact, and we used PowerPoints, which I sometimes refuse to do here, but it wasn't death by PowerPoint.
And what was the point of your message to these college age? These were undergraduate
opportunity.
And
I said
within
within
country
Vietnam.
or within
Vietnam. I said I left. This is in 2007. I just left Cisco, Bristol Myers, Johnson & Johnson. They're here. They're at Nguyen Square, District 1, 28th floor, 29th floor, okay? They're sitting there with sheetrock still in place, or being put in place. The CEOs of the Asian desk of Cisco I sat with, he's in a beach chair with a cell phone and talking about, you know, making arrangements, this, that, and the other. So I sat down and I talked to them for a while. And every one of them said the same thing. We're not bringing expats over anymore, expatriates. Why? Well, because one, it's too hot. They don't like the food. They don't speak the language. And their mother calls us from Stamford, Connecticut, the second day. When is Johnny coming home? And the CEO says, next flight I can put him on, you know? So he said, the people here speak 4 and 5 languages. And he said, who better to take this Vietnam moldable and extend it under the principle of ASEAN, Association of Southeast Asian Nations.
Okay, so that was the beginning of your educational mission.
Well, it was beginning
in Vietnam. But since then, it's expanded.
Since
and
then,
continues.
I've headed north.
Oh.
I went into Da Nang, which was the area of operation that I was in. It was a Marine Corps AO, area of operation. I knew it well. And and I also knew the people of Da Nang would be much more sympathetic than I would find north. And because the people in Da Nang, most of them are people that didn't get out, okay? But there's a southern tier and a northern tier, Bac and Nam Viet, okay? The northern tier is still the north. They're coming up the curve very slowly. But the entrepreneurial flair and desire and everything else to be part of this global equation is definitely in the south, more so. The north is beginning to get it, which is why I delayed the trip to the north. The trip to the north took place, I guess, 2 years ago. It was the first time I went into Hanoi. and I went into Hanoi National, and I taught the kids there. And again, that was after I went into the State Department.
Yeah.
And there were some other connections, business connections, in the Hanoi area that I made, and I got the door open with Hanoi.
You didn't experience any animosity on the part of the kids because it's their parents who were left. We left them there.
Yep.
And so there must have still been some
There is a mix.
bad memories.
There's a lot of bad memories. For the South Vietnamese over here,
Yes.
their parents got out. Okay,
Yes.
so now we're looking at the next generation.
Right.
Okay, and it's not even, it's the first generation.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Vietnamese. Their parents don't want them to go back to the north.
Mm-hmm.
They're beginning to release the sense of go back to the south to see the family, but don't go to the north.
Mm-hmm.
That's beginning to change. The people from the north are much more open-minded that way.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, they don't see any difference. They see a one Vietnam, but there's still a fine line, and you got to be sensitive to that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when I go to the north, I add the flavor of, by the way, and I speak in Vietnamese, and then I say, I lived in these villages, this, this, which are south of here, but I also say, by the way, your grandfathers shot me 3 times. So again, you know, I'm just here, just coming back, you know, just to say hello. And they're like, wow, he's come back, even though, you know, and that warms the audience up. But that's why I also get back into the question you had earlier, opportunity. Opportunity is built around, again, and I said, the field of dreams. Build it and they will come. And that's where the Bristol Myers, the Johnsons, the Ciscos are there. And I said, they're here. You're here. Make the link.
Yeah.
Okay? And if you do, there's the future.
In the intervening 6 or 7 years since you started, you've had at least one full cycle graduate. And are you beginning to see the fruits of your labor, you and others, of your labor? Are they beginning to take their positions in the local economy with U.S. companies as well as others, in leadership? Well, they're too young to have leadership positions, but with potential to grow into leadership positions?
Rick, 2 years ago, I was doing a graduation ceremony presentation at Hanoi National. And I'm thinking to myself, it was only because I'm nondescript didn't show up from the University of Tennessee. He did show up. He showed up about an hour and a half late. Looked like he fell off a Goodwill truck. And the president of the university, who parenthetically happened to be almost the same age, and we sat down and we talked. I knew he had to be in the military someplace. And we found out that we were probably maybe 2,000 meters from each other, just a little over a mile, in 1969. And he was a tank battalion commander with the North Vietnamese. He's now the president of Hanoi National University. So I'm thinking to myself, what an opportunity, sort of, you know, unrehearsed. I said, what am I going to say? I said, I know what I'm going to say. What I'm going to say is going to have more impact than any 500-pound bomb ever had in 67, 68, 69. Because the people I see out here, the 1,200 undergraduate and graduates sitting in this ceremony, I know that at least 200 of them are going to be in government someplace. They're the biggest employer. At least 200. Some of them are going to be in a very influential role. So the message I leave here today is something that hopefully will carry for a lifetime and never forget. So that was the opportunity I saw. Now, in terms of 6 years later, do I see the results of it? Not really yet. But there are some kids that are with Cisco, with Bristol Myers, and, you know, they're going to be with other companies.
I can understand why that kind of experience, going there, the special opportunity that you have and you created for yourself, would be very, very gratifying. Do you have the same gratification here in the classes you teach at Villanova? It could be any U.S. university, but it happens to be Villanova. With those students?
Villanova, I would say, is one of the exceptions. You know, you have students that are hungry, know what opportunity is. I said hungry in the sense of they want knowledge, they want application, and they want real life application.
These are evening college students. They're going for their undergraduate degrees.
Well, some of them, but I teach one course here in the morning.
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I have, and in fact, I went to see the chair of the engineering department about 5 years ago, and I said, it'd be great if you got more engineers involved in business communication. And whether that was the reason or not, but my class is full of engineers. And they take the course at 8:30 in the morning because I usually end up shooting out to New York afterwards. They love it. I mean, it's not me. It's just it's opening the door, okay?
Yeah.
But and it's exciting. I enjoy it. I have the same sort of a different, feeling when I walk out of that class as I do with the kids from Vietnam, but they're no different.
Okay.
I wish I could say that all educational levels are the same, but they're not.
No, they're not.
They're not, and that's what's going to hurt this country.
Yes.
We don't have a Confucianist principle of work ethic that's mandated by parents, by institutions, by kids themselves. These kids in Vietnam have very little, but they know they have the opportunity. And believe me, that's going to be a shared window that our kids aren't counting on.
It's hard to say. It was 2 generations ago here. 2 generations ago, we started losing it. And for the most part, it's gone.
Oh, it's very definable.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, so you were, in that instance, a social entrepreneur. At least in my mind, you were a social entrepreneur. You continue to pursue other entrepreneurial ventures, one of which you've told me about, and that is called Fire Armor 55. Tell me about that.
Fire Armor 55, it's not my idea. I was asked by somebody to represent this guy somewhere along the way.
Yep.
And
we have a lot of inventors. We have too few people who can sell the invention.
This is a mountain boy from Missouri, okay? Now, and it takes usually about 5 minutes for him to say hello. But what a mind. This guy could create anything. He has built covering areas for oil rigs in terms of protection with some of this product application. The product is a cementitious spray-on product. And it's the 55 acknowledges the 5,500 degrees that in fact it's been tested at. Anything known to man, manganese, oil fires, whatever. You spray it on, put it around. You could coat this, spec it into a house, a building.
So it's not to put out a fire, it's to prevent?
It could put the fire out.
Okay.
We have attempted that with, again, back to even 2 governors ago before Schwarzenegger, Davis in California, when they were having the big fires in San Diego and others. We couldn't even get in there to do a spray over. We're going to take a C-130 and spray it over. We could have saved the lives, in my opinion, of the 19 firemen that died in Arizona by containing that. It builds a firewall around it and acts as a sponge. And again, it's tested. We're not talking about a concept. We're talking about something that's been tested by Boeing, tested by Jet Propulsion Lab out in Pasadena, California. 7 scientists, 4 Chinese, 3 Indian, acknowledged after a 7-hour test. They said this is the only product that we could take to Mars because it's tested both cryogenically and thermally.
So it could be used in oil rigs, for example, off the coast?
Oil rigs to 3,400 degrees.
Yeah, to prevent and or contain fires.
Yeah, contain fires. Yeah. No problem at all. No problem whatsoever.
And your experience has been, and I've heard this from other entrepreneurs as well.
The experience has been, let's just say that innovation is not built on tradition.
No.
Okay.
It's the antithesis.
We've lost the spirit of innovation. And we also, you've got to connect all the dots in this thing. Now, why would an insurance company fight it? We've gone to them. Some of them just realize that, a lot of premiums are built around something called risk.
It's economics.
So I won't get into that. I won't connect the dots for you. Right. There's a lot of construction firms that, unfortunately, you got to understand it. Probably 37% of their rebuilds happen to be fires. You got to understand that a lot of other people, you're going to be messing with a very big cash flow window. If you come along and preempt and eliminate the element of fear, well, we can do that. How's that for a statement? And that was a statement not by this guy. It was a statement made by National Research, by way of NRL, Naval Research, Jet Propulsion Lab, Corps of Engineers. That was in black and white. Quote, this is in the national interest. Where did it go? Nowhere.
But Jim McCloskey, you're an inventive, ingenious person who has improvised through your entire life. This is a temporary problem. You're going to overcome it somehow.
Do I look like I'm ruffled? No, I'm more focused.
All right.
The more resistance there is, the higher the wall you build, the more I'm going to take it down.
Might you not have more opportunity in Vietnam?
Yes.
Or offshore someplace?
Well,
Funny you should
there was a
mention
lot
it.
of resistance in Vietnam too.
Oh, really?
Oh, sure. I mean,
Oh,
first
for
of
the
all,
same reasons.
yeah. Well, our veterans are the greatest thing in the world.
Yeah.
But it's tough to explain. But I lived a different experience. I lived in the villages. Okay. I know the people, and I fought with a militia. I fought with a farmer that took out probably 70 NVA, North Vietnamese himself, with a machine gun that I stole for him. Okay. I won't go on
No,
record
don't go
on
there.
that.
Don't go there, yeah.
But this guy he's protecting his little piece of a rice paddy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know there were a lot of other conflicting elements over there, but I've tried to bring the same spirit to where we are now. When the military goes in sometimes, there's nobody better. But you got to understand, when you go into places like Iraq, you have Sunnis, Shiites, and Kurds. The same thing you have in Vietnam. You have North Vietnamese, Viet Cong sympathizers, Viet Cong. Maybe the sympathizers are just doing it under the fear. You've got the same thing in a little place called Bosnia. You had Serbs, Croats, Bosniaks. Oh, you also have Albanians, Montenegrins, and Macedonians. But we don't, unfortunately, we don't really grasp the impact of culture.
No, we don't.
Which is 70% of it. It's not the language, okay?
No,
it's understanding the culture.
And we will continue to be at a disadvantage because we don't. I'm going to turn the page on you the time we have left because I want to talk about your Santa project. Again, another thing that somehow fills a big chunk of your life. Tell us about the Santa project now that we are approaching the season.
Well, yeah, we're in full court press right now.
This is
the Santa's St.
Chris's
Chris's Hospital.
Right.
And there was a friend of mine, a very good friend of mine, John McKeever, who lost a son to leukemia. And rather than stick his head in the sand, which God bless parents that go through this, I don't know how you do it when you bury a child before you are. But he put such energy back into somehow filling the void for the parents that were going through this and the afterwards. And it was magnetic. And I go, my heart melts for kids. So I went down to St. Chris's, I did a few other things with them, and then I said, wouldn't it be nice, especially at St. Chris's, it's the poor kids' hospital. CHOP is the other side. So again, what I did was say, let's do something a little differently. We're going to extract the kids from the hospital. And I did this with full support of the hematologists and oncologists. I said, I bring them home because they're in the combat zone of Philadelphia. I targeted 2 areas. I wanted the most terminal kids and the most impoverished. We bring the kids home so they can be with their siblings. Why? The siblings learn to hate them.
Yes.
Understandably, they're little kids.
Yeah.
They don't have a Christmas or any other holiday because of the kid. Because any money mom has, single parent mom goes to prescriptions, taxi cabs, or what. So we bring them home, and I have them write a letter 10 days before Christmas. I used to have them write a letter to Santa Claus. I said, write a letter to Santa Claus asking for whatever you want. A little kid about 12 years ago said to me, how do I ask Santa for 6 more months of life? So I go, okay, my mouth dropped on that one. So what we do is, I say, you be Santa Claus, you ask for, I don't care, the Xbox 360s, plasma TVs, bikes, I don't care, whatever it was. So we make that a day, literally right out of Polar Express. When all else slips away, along comes Christmas Day. And we make that the moment to freeze. So if that child dies, the memory the kids have is not the ogre, but sainthood.
How many people are involved in this now?
About 300.
300.
And we do it through LaSalle High School.
Every year.
A group called Committee to Benefit the Children.
You do it every year. Yeah. It's a great story. Regrettably, we're running out of time, and we've covered only a few aspects of your life, what you have accomplished, what you are still accomplishing. So I guess we'll have to have you back sometime in the near future. But in the meantime, thank you very, very much for being here.
My pleasure. Thanks, Rick.
Jim McCloskey and the lives he leads on behalf of so many other people. This is the Entrepreneurs Network. I am Rick Anthony. Take very good care of yourselves.